We mourn when we have pain, and pain is suffering, right? It's inflicted. It may be inflicted internally because our body is falling apart. It may be inflicted externally because something happened. Like the 22 people on the bus had pain, not because they did anything. Well, you might say the driver must have made an error. We don't know. But the other 21 have pain because something outside of them disrupted their pain. Now, how many of you, if you said to your neighbor who is not a Christian or not, maybe they're a Christian but not actively participating in a faith community, how many of you, if you went to them and said, oh, I want you to come to worship today because we're going to grow in faith and the pastor's going to preach about mourning. Not M-O-R-I-N-I-N-G, but M-O-U-R-I-N-G. Would that be attractive? Do we want to hear about pain and suffering and grief and saying God wants us to suffer? No. That is countercultural. When Jesus gives us the Beatitudes, He's teaching us what it means to grow in faith with God, and it isn't going to be the way the world wants to grow. But God promises abundant living. How many of you want abundant living? We all do, right? But we want to do it our way. We don't want to do it God's way. Now you might ask, if God is a good and loving God, why would He want us to suffer? Why would Jesus say, blessed are those who mourn? Remember, blessed means it's an outward action of giving somebody joy. Blessed are those, joy from the Lord comes when you mourn. Why would God say that? Because then you will be comforted. You will be comforted by God's love and grace. When we see pain or grief, what do we recognize? Generally, it'll either bring us to the cross or it'll take us away, right? When we come to the cross, if we are a believer, someone who says that they believe that Jesus came as God to die on the cross for us so that we could be reconciled with God, when we say that and we experience loss and grief and pain, we usually do what? Cry out to God. Is that right? And what does God do? When we cry out to God, God comforts us, doesn't He? He gives us hope. He gives us healing. And that healing sometimes is not the physical healing that we think of. But that healing comes within our souls. All right? It may not be that when we walk out of the hospital, we are perfectly the same as we were before. But what it does mean is that when we are with God, we feel God's peace because we all of a sudden feel the big picture. It is in our hurting and suffering that we can experience God's love and grace. And guess what? When the next person experiences the same type of pain and suffering and loss that you have, what can you do as a Christian? You can say, I've been there. I know what you're feeling. But God is with us. And that's why God says, blessed are those who mourn, because God mourned. From the get-go, God grieved the loss of His created humans. They went their own way, just like the prodigal son, just like all of our teenagers tend to do at times. Went their own way, and God knew it was taking them away from Him. And that was His desire, His relationship, creating a relationship with humanity that He created. And He found a way to bring us back through Jesus Christ. And when Jesus was here, did Jesus go around saying, great is the day, great is the day, blessed is the day? Maybe sometimes. Palm Sunday, we know He did. He celebrated. We know He celebrated at the wedding. But most of the time we see pictures in the gospel of Jesus doing what? Mourning and grieving the pain and loss of people. It says in the God intimately. He walked with them. And Jesus was there in Jerusalem and wailed, weep, and mourned, "O Jerusalem, because he knew their hearts were not for God. He knew the future that was going to happen. Jesus wept when his friend Lazarus had died. He grieved when the woman was crying for her child. All those things helped Jesus understand as a human what it meant that without God, as this little African symbol, Genrich says, except for God, there is no hope. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And as Christians, blessed are us who struggle. Why, that's not what we thought we'd hear, right? How many of us want to struggle? How many of us ask, including this pastor, for prayers of the pain and suffering that we're dealing with? Because we want to get out of it. We don't want to be in it. But blessed are us who mourn and suffer, because God's working good things. God is helping us grow to know God and that need for God, and we will be comforted and we will be able to comfort others. Right, Sherry? Not what anybody would wish, but look at the gift God gave. I want to read you a story. I had a lot of things planned, but